I'm excited to introduce Nicole Dennis-Benn here for her debut novel, Here Comes the Sun, one of this year's nominees for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Described in the New York Times as a light, artfully plotted debut, it follows four women living in a small, impoverished village outside the resort town of Montego Bay, Jamaica. Through their stories, Nicole exposes the dark truths behind Jamaica's sunny, blissful exterior, shining light on the real and complex lives of those who not only work to make Jamaica a tourist paradise, but who bear the brutal brunt of that fantasy and of Jamaica's deep divisions. It's a visceral, unforgettable portrayal of Jamaican society from a writer of immense talent. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, Nicole received an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence. She's a recipient of several prestigious prizes and fellowships, including the Richard and Julie Longsdon Fiction Prize, and was twice nominated for the Pushcart Prize in Fiction. Nicole will be in conversation with Marita Golden, co-founder of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and author of at least 14 works of fiction and nonfiction, including Don't Play in the Sun, One Woman's Journey Through the Color Complex. Please join me in welcoming Nicole Dennis-Benn and Marita Golden to Politics and Prose.
Beautiful. So good evening. My name is Nicole Dennis-Benn. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all so much for coming out to this reading and book signing. All right, so I'm just going to start off by just giving a brief synopsis of the novel. I know it was beautifully described just now, but, you know, the scene I'm about to read is Tandy, who is the youngest daughter. So, you know, this novel follows the lives of three women living in Montego Bay. On the outskirts, there's a little fictional town called Riverbank, and it's about to be taken over by a huge resort that's about to, you know, push them out of their fishing village. And so, you know, in this novel, Dolores, who's a souvenir vendor, you know, she fights hard because her dream is to send her daughter to medical school. Margot, the older sister, that's her same dream. She's a hotel clerk, but at night she prostitutes herself to tourists just to make ends meet. And Tandy, who's that daughter who bears all the brunt, all the pressure, you know, everybody wants her to go to medical school, but her dream is to be an artist. And in a society like Jamaica, you know, she sees her way out of poverty as bleaching her skin to become white, like the ruling class on the island. And so in this scene, you'll see Tandy in Miss Ruby's shack. And Miss Ruby's really the woman who she goes to each week to bleach her skin. I used to be black like you, but now look at me. Miss Ruby turns her head from side to side for Tandy to see her salmon-colored skin, delicate with the texture of scalded milk. See how bright my skin come? If you follow instructions, yours will get this way quicker. Know that you have the Queen of Pearl? You might be lucky. If you want faster results, use it twice a day. She rubs the concoction up and down Tandy's neck, back, arms, and shoulders. She rubs everywhere but her butt crack. Miss Ruby is hardly tender. Tandy wonders if Miss Ruby's roughness is punishment for not having followed her earlier instructions. She imagines her blackness peeling off. The hydrogen peroxide Miss Ruby pours into the mixture, acting like an abrasive, a medicine for her melancholy. She closes her eyes as the warm formula touches her skin. Miss Ruby works her way to Tandy's chest. The circular motion of a stranger's hands on her breast makes Tandy blush. She has never been touched this way. She opens her eyes and searches for something, anything, that can take her mind off the sensation of this strange woman's fingers. She imagines herself as a fish Miss Ruby rubs down with salt and vinegar before frying. Her eyes find the ceiling. Had she been able to lift her arm, she would trace the things she sees projected from her mind. Luckily you have good hair already, Miss Ruby says. Good coolie hair. Your daddy's an Indian? I don't know, Tandy says, still staring up at the planks in the ceiling. Never met him. Well, God played a cruel joke on you, because, child, if your skin was as pretty as your hair, you'd be one gorgeous woman. Miss Ruby isn't saying anything Tandy hasn't heard before. Her mother says the same thing, often shaking her head the way she does over burned food that has gone to waste. It's a pity you never have skin like your daddy. Tandy's needed the nutmeg brown that makes Margot, her sister and honorable mistress, a rung lower than the bright-skinned wife. Nor is she black like her mother Dolores, whose skin makes people sympathetic when they see her. Who want to be black like that in this place? Miss Ruby once said to Tandy about her mother. Miss Ruby gives Tandy the homemade mixture in the jar for her to apply as needed. Only as needed, she stresses. These are very strong chemicals that could kill you. She then reaches for the saran wrap and begins to wrap Tandy's arms and torso. A mummified Tandy sits and listens to Miss Ruby's instructions. If you want come quicker, leave on the plastic. Don't wash, don't go in the sun. If you have to go in the sun for whatever reason, make sure you cover up at all times from head to toe. If you start to feel like you're going to faint, just drink water. It make you sweat more. Whatever you do, not take off the plastic. And remember, stay out of that sun. Miss Ruby repeats these words like an ominous warning, her eyes pouring into Tandy's. Tandy listens and nods, though she wants to rip the saran wrap off and jump into the river. She imagines her skin boiling, becoming molten liquid underneath the plastic wrap. Do I have to wear this all the time? Tandy asks. Heat and sweat is the advantage. Just bear it, Miss Ruby says, stamping her with a look. Tandy regrets saying anything, sensing her complaint might be interpreted as her wanting less out of life. Less opportunity, less chance of attracting the type of boys her mother and sister want her to attract. The type who will be at the pool party for sure. Less chance of acceptance in school. Less chance to flunk school, the only ship on which black girls like her could float, given that their looks will never do it for them. Her mother tells her this too. The only thing you have going for you is education. No ruin it. Meanwhile, the unintelligent brownings in school end up with modeling contracts or with boyfriends with money they can spend on them. The less attractive ones get good jobs in their family businesses. What else does she have to fall back on if she fails the exam besides her drawings? But no one wants those. No one respects an artist. So when Tandy puts her clothes on, she pretends to ignore the crinkling of the plastic under her uniform and the nausea that comes over her. Miss Ruby examines her skin, her eyes like a sharp razor raking over Tandy's body, as though looking for areas she might have missed. Dark patches that need to be rubbed down, scrubbed down with the rigor of someone scouring the bottom of a burnt pot. Or the way she used to scale fish, her eyes having them a subtle hostility that reminds Tandy of the way the girls and nuns at school look at her. Can she tell Tandy doesn't belong? Can she sniff her deceit? Perhaps in that moment, Tandy reminds her of someone who did her wrong, or of herself, the way she looked before she bleached her skin. How suddenly her mood changes once Tandy pays her the money. Remember to stay out of that sun like I tell you, Miss Ruby says, 'cause you and I both know God not like ugly. Okay. So that was Tandy's scene. And the next scene I'm about to read is Margot, Tandy's older sister. And like I said, Margot, prostitutes herself at night. So this is her story. Margot rolls over, her legs straddling Horace. She pinches his pink flesh between her fingers and watches it turn white. Horace groans and smiles up at her through drooping eyelids. Had she been attracted to him, she would have kissed the place on his cheeks where his long lashes touch, and placed her lips on top of his puckered ones. She would have even had the patience to lie beside him beforehand and run her fingers over the hairs on his enormous chest and belly. Instead, she mounts him and moves her hips steadily, rhythmically. His hands grip her thighs before moving to her breasts. In sex, she finds a deep calm, a refuge in which she hides. She imagines herself as a vacuum, inhaling everything, every word, every thought, every glance, every tear. They'd all disappear out of sight, only to be emptied behind the hotel, like balls of dust the maids throw into big bins while humming their familiar sad songs that Margot used to hear her grandmother hum. As a little girl, she knew the sorrows in those songs, but felt immune to the pain in them. She knew already that helplessness is weak, and that there's no use in having faith in God. God is not the one to put food on the table or send her sister to school, and God is certainly not the one keeping the roof over their heads. She sways high above Horace like a palm tree in a cool breeze, as he whispers his gratitude, sometimes cursing her with expletives that cause her to throw her head back and pick up speed. His head is small and inconspicuous from where she sits. There are moments when another person comes to mind, feminine lips parting, hungry for more than Margot's body. The person's eyes are steady on hers. Margot knows those eyes. They plead with her, so she concentrates instead on the unremarkable man's head below her. She rocks and sways, aware of the creeping chaos, the sensation that spreads from her groin all the way to his curled toes, as though her orgasm has possessed his body too. When it's over, Margot spirals down and down, crushing like a big tree, uprooted by nature's merciless axe. She lies next to Horace, postcoital disgust and a lurking disappointment coiling in her belly like days-old milk. She's human again. Okay. Lastly, I'll read Dolores. Now, Dolores is Tandy's mother. And in this scene, Dolores is trying to convince Tandy of something. Of course, I won't tell you what that is. I'll have you get the books first to find out. All right, yes. Dolores comes close to Tandy, her arms open as if to embrace her. Tandy's prepared to rest her head against her mother's big breast. She's ready to drop her shoulders and let her mother rub them. Tell her that it will be all right, that Clover got what he deserved. The embrace is a sweet one Tandy had forgotten until now. Her mother's love is as vicious and domineering as her personality. Once it's felt, there's none other like it. Tandy relaxes in Dolores' embrace, allowing herself to be rocked back and forth, like a baby. But then it's cut short. Slowly, Dolores pries Tandy off her and holds her at arm's length. I want you to come to your senses and turn that boy in. Everything happened for a reason, and that was it, Dolores says. Do it for all of it, Tandy. He was defending me. The devil is a liar. Him kick you down, but it don't mean you can't get back up and use the tool him fling give you. What Clover did is history, something long gone. So put it behind you and do the right thing. Him is a brute, mama. Shush. You go and pay for cursing the dead. Dolores pulls Tandy closer again and rocks her in her bosom. She smells like the green banana she sliced up. She runs her fingers through Tandy's hair as she speaks. You and that boy Charles shouldn't mix in the first place. As me say, if you pick up with a street boy, then you must at least get something out of it. Forget about what Clover did. That won't set you free. Enough people it happened to, and it didn't kill them. What will set you free is money. Don't say me never teach you that. I send you to a good school for good reasons, yes? But it's also for you to learn common sense. You think because Charles him love you that you worth something? You think because him want you that him mean it? That is not wanting him after, and when him get it, him run? What is this love, eh? You don't know nothing but no love. Love is foolish. You ever see love put running water in pipe? You ever see love build roof over our head? You ever see love give a free education to those children whose parents can't afford school fee? You ever see love fill up the cupboard? You ever see love hand with visa to get out of this rat hole? What can love do for you, eh? How you go and love a stranger when you don't even know what love is? It will just take advantage of you and walk away. You have to get your return in dollars, not cents. And besides, who gonna want a naive girl like you? But suppose him did really want you. Could you really love somebody who is an absolute fool when it comes on to these things? Somebody who green? You don't want that, and neither would he. You're giving him everything for free. Boys like trippy girls like that. They take one look at your black face and know how you're desperate enough to spread your legs at the first compliment. They see your true color before you tell them your name. They know they can't tell you anything and your black self believe it and accept it. How we so used to getting the leftovers. Who you know really love a black girl for more than what's between her legs? You's a pretty black girl, yes? But it's my duty as your mother to teach you these things. Put something in your head. Child, you know how much you could have get? 10,000 US dollars. That can take you from here to eternity. Pay for your education and everything. Use your head, child. You can't place more value on this boy and his foolish love over money. If it means so little to you, then you lose everything. Remember this, nobody love a black girl, not even ourselves. Now get up and get your pay. That's it. Thank you.
Well, in terms of honoring full disclosure, I have to say that Nicole and I met 4 years ago.
I think more than that.
5 years ago?
2010.
Oh, God.
Or 2011.
Okay,
So
5 or 6 years
Yeah.
ago, when she attended the Hurston Writers Week. The Zora Hurston Richard Wright Foundation, which I co-founded, every summer presents a summer writers workshop for black writers. And Nicole was in the fiction workshop that I taught, and that launched a mentorship and friendship,
Yes.
which has been very satisfying. And so I was very, very pleased to be part of the support that allowed her to get this book done. And I'm very pleased that the Hurston Wright Foundation was one of the several literary communities that supported her on a long, arduous, but very successful
Yes.
journey.
Thank you.
Only you and I knew
Yes.
the ins and outs
Yes.
of the journey. And Nicole is actually, in addition to being a wonderful fiction writer, she's establishing herself as a wonderful, very trenchant, very provocative, and very courageous essayist, and addressing many of the topics that she addresses in the novel. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is to talk about the inspiration for the book. I mean, because in the book, what happens is you manage to weave in a critique of everything from neo-colonialism to sexism to homophobia, and still honor this very powerful story about the lives of these women. So what was your inspiration?
So for Here Comes the Well, the seed for Here Comes the Sun was planted in 2010 when I returned home to visit for the first time in years. I had not been home for many reasons, and when I finally went home, it was actually with my wife, who was then my partner. And a lot of old emotions or raw emotions were still there. So I really didn't really feel them until I was there. And so I journaled a lot. And in journaling, I returned to New York and realized that I had an outline for a novel. And that was a novel that kept me awake at nights. That was a novel that I worked on, and it's Here Comes the Sun. I did not workshop it in my MFA program, but I continued working on it. And so it got sold in 2015. And here we are. But it really resulted from going back home for the very first time in a long time.
Now, the fact that you were going back home kind of as an outsider.
Yeah, yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I stayed away for so long, I'd come out to my parents. And in coming out to my parents, I was ostracized from the family. And I didn't feel comfortable going back home without having a great relationship with them. So I stayed away for a very long time. I was living in Brooklyn. I didn't see anything of it by not going home. But then I met my wife, who was saying to me, well, you're a great person, but something is missing. How is it that I'm not seeing the full you, your true identity? Who are you? And in that question, who am I? 100% really of who I am. I'm Jamaican. And that part of me was erased by the time I met her. And she was really curious about that, because here I have this accent. I would mention family members, but then she'd still not know who these people are and where I'm from, my childhood. So I made that decision to take her back so she could know the full me. And she ended up falling in love with the island. And through her, interestingly enough, I fell in love with my island as well. And that's how I was able to revisit some of those hurts. And in visiting those hurts, something opened up in me. As a creative person, as a writer, it fed a lot of things. And Here Comes the Sun was one of them. And of course, my other works coming up, you know, we'll see bits and pieces of that in terms of how inspired I was by going back home in the first place.
You married a good woman.
Yes, indeed, I did.
Now, the three women, well, there are four women in the book, actually, who are dominant, but in the family, you know, Dolores and Tandy and Margot, in a way, they sort of represent three different generations almost of island experience. And yet there's differences. There are these tragic similarities that haunt them. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So, you know, what I read up there, you know, it was Dolores and her two daughters, Margot and Tandy. And really, Dolores's character is the voice of the colonial scars we still carry, you know, as a country. You know, she's the one who tells her daughter, you know, you're not worthy as black girls. And, you know, Dolores is a very complex character because you may read her and you're like, oh my gosh, she's so cruel. But, you know, as a mother, she is the first person to break her daughters, saying, you know, as black girls, the world is still going to not affirm them. So why am I not the first person to do this? And that's how Dolores is operating. She pulls her daughters down to the point where they themselves, you know, Margot, who is that hotel clerk who prostitutes herself at night, she becomes this machine. All she wants is money because for her, that's her worth, right? Her mother had told her before, all you need is money. In Tandy's situation, which I just read, you know, of course, I won't reveal why $10,000 is very important at that moment, but you see Dolores through the dialogue in really what she what she teaches her daughters, and you know, they end up being or becoming women much like their mothers. So it was generationally passed down from mother to two daughters, and it was a reflection. I wanted to use the lives of these three women as a reflection for how, you know, as black women on the island, we carry these scars still.
Now, in Western aesthetics, there's often this view that politics and literature, politics and art are anathema, and that they never the twain shall meet, which of course is nonsense.
Right.
And one of the satisfactions of the novel, as I've sort of alluded to, is that it is a deeply political commentary as well as a personal story. And I know there are writers in the audience. And how did you manage to keep that delicate balance between making your political points, making your sociological points, but not sacrificing the humanity and the complexity and the delicacy of the characterizations?
That's a very good question. Thanks. Only Marita can ask that question.
Yeah, only Marita can ask a question like that.
Right. So, oh my gosh, was it a struggle? Really, the journaling helped a lot to maintain that, the characterization. By journaling, a lot of my raw emotions, that's where the characterizations, that's how Tandy was born. That was how Margot came up. That was how Dolores came up. But in terms of the political aspect, I wanted to use these three women because I didn't want to appear too didactic. I didn't want people to read it saying, oh yeah, it's a great sociological work of art, but not see the storyline. And that was hard to navigate at first. But once I started trusting the characters to lead me, right, I wasn't dictating what they'll do and what they'll say, and you know, anything like that in terms of what was going on the country. I wanted to use these characters. So if Margot is leading me into the deep, dark dungeons of the prostitution ring in Montego Bay, I was willing to follow her there without holding back. And thankfully, I wasn't fearful because one of the other questions I get a lot of recently was, are you afraid now that your country is going to banish you? Because, you know, I've revealed a lot of dirty secrets, and them being a very, you know, the tourism industry, that's how we get a majority of our revenue. And so what's revealed in this novel, you know, at first, you know, people were saying, oh my gosh, I'm so scared for you. But ironically, they love it. And because a lot of the things I've said were things that many Jamaicans have thought, but never brought themselves to say out loud. And I'm glad that it has finally come out. And I'm getting a lot of fan emails from people who are visiting Jamaica saying, oh my God, I'm carrying your novel, or I've read your novel. Like, how do I treat the staff there? And I'm like, well, you know, just treat them with respect. You know, that's just respect. You know, people want to be seen. And just to piggyback on the first question that you asked, Margot, when my wife and I visited Jamaica, one of the hotel clerks told us, a lot of tourists come to our island and they'd rather not see the people. They love your beaches, they love your country, but they'd rather not see the people. And that hurt. As a Jamaican myself, that hurt me because I'm like, why? Our people are so great. We're so talented. And to come to a country or a particular place, not even in Jamaica, it could be Bali, it could be Hawaii, and not see the people, that's problematic. And I wanted to establish in this book that, yes, our island is beautiful, but take a look at the people. And that's why it was very important to me to create these multidimensional, complex characters so that people can see them as more than caricatures, but persons. So
you kind of anticipated one of my other questions when you said that when you allowed yourself to follow your characters wherever they led you, because one of my questions was going to be, at what point did you know that you were writing the story that you had been called to write? Was it at the point where you were willing to follow them wherever they led?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. I call them fairy godmothers. So after my novel sold, of course, I have a great agent, Julie Barrer, and I have a great editor, Katie Anderson Adams at Norton. And it's so interesting because they saw something. I had Tandy, in all honesty, I had Tandy as, the person who opened the book, right? And at the editor's meeting, my first editorial meeting with Katie, she said, do you understand that Margot is a person that's speaking the loudest here? And at first I was really afraid of Margot initially because of her sexuality, her being, interested in this woman. And of course, I was like, oh my gosh, if this book goes to Jamaica, what's going to happen? All the homophobic things. And so I trusted Margot. When I started trusting Margot, that was actually when I really realized, wait, this is me. This is the story I want to tell. And using Margot as my heroine to tell that story. Because really, Margot is working class. And for those of you who are not familiar with Jamaica, our class system is very rigid there. It's upward mobility is really hard. So you're born into a certain class. You can't move up if you don't have a great scholarship somewhere. Somebody's willing to vouch for you. Somehow, and Margot did not get that. Margot was that girl who went to secondary school, and her next thing in life was to probably go to a vocational school, and that was all she would have ended up doing. But Margot took things into her own hands, and as you will see, she did everything by all means necessary to make sure that her sister does not end up where she could have ended up. And that's where Margot is operating from. And by that, to me, Margot is a real revolutionary in my eyes, because she's that one who's fighting that system. And with that character, it has led me to different avenues, and I'm realizing that, I hope one day that somebody on the island who has that power can read a character like that and say, well, listen, our education needs to be free. We don't have free education there. And if you're a 10-year-old little boy roaming the streets, kicking pebbles, that's problematic, because that means our whole generation is growing up uneducated. And what are they going to do to survive? They do anything. So that's something that I wanted to open up with the novel, but using that character.
Well, the love story between Verdine
Moore
and Margot is quite beautiful, also tragic, very complex, and in the book you very dramatically portray the level of homophobia among these very poor people who live in this village. But we've had conversations about homophobia as it is expressed in Jamaica, and there's a nuanced aspect to that. And when we talked about it, it was good to hear that nuanced aspect, that there is homophobia, but so I'd like you to talk about that.
One thing, we know that Jamaica is homophobic, but it depends on what class you belong to. So again, the class divisions come up. You're very insulated by class. So if you belong in the upper class and you have the money to live in a gated community, you have friends who have traveled, they're more exposed, they're more educated. Of course, you can exist on the island as an openly gay person. You may appear asexual at your job because you don't have rights, but you can go back up on the hill in your gated community and be gay or lesbian. But the working class community, if they are found out to be gay or lesbian, it's a different story because they live in areas where it's not as, you don't have nice hedges to hide who's coming to your house and whether or not you have children or not, all these things. So people could, see what's going on. And so they're at more risk. So Margot, Dolores, and Tandy, they live in Riverbank. Everybody knows everybody's business. And so Verdine Moore is this woman who everybody knows is a lesbian. And, they fear her. They think she's a witch for obvious reasons. And so I wanted to depict that because Verdine Moore was not going to leave her country. She was not going to leave her community because she's a part of that community. And just to be fair, Margot wanted to move them out from Riverbank to Lagoons, which is known as a community that's filled with expats from America and Europe. And so Margot thinks by them moving to Lagoons, they could be safe. And so that was one of her drives. Margot doesn't really know what love is, as you'll see. But her first step was saying, okay, I can be open with me moving you to Lagoons as opposed to staying in Riverbank where somebody could look over the fence and see me coming to the house. And so that fear was there by virtue of where they lived. Yeah.
So the class distinctions.
Right.
Determine pretty much everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
My final question before I open up to the audience, what do you want readers to take away from this book?
Ooh, a lot. I really and truly wrote the human experience. First of all, I know it's set in Jamaica. It was written as a love letter to Jamaica, but it's for everyone because, especially once like the concept of family, trying to find love, acceptance, belonging, right? That's something that we have all been through. We have all experienced love and loss. And that's one of those are big themes in the book as well. And so whoever is reading the book, I want them to take away from that in terms of what we go through, what we have to do to sacrifice. That's another thing to sacrifice. And Dolores and Margot, for example, they work overtime to make sure that that Tandy makes it, that Tandy is the one to become a better person or somebody who can actually rise out of the ghetto or rise above where they are. And we've all been there at some point in life where, we had parents who were just like, oh my gosh, you're going to be the one to graduate college, go to Howard University, go to UPenn, go to Georgetown, that was a drive that was pushing Margot and Dolores to do what they had to do to enable Tandy. And another thing too, displacement. Displacement is not only happening in Jamaica in the tourism industry, it's happening here in DC, it's happening in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, it's happening everywhere. So, when people come up to me saying, oh my gosh, I'm from Southern California and what you described in Riverbank was exactly what happened to my small town. And, so the fact that people are connecting from with various different things. And even the Jamaicans who might be homophobic, but then they read the Dolores and they read perhaps the Charles and falls in love with Charles, and they're like, oh my gosh, I really connect with this character because, and they'll tell me, and it's so different. So, I wanted a book that people can connect on different levels. Yeah.
I think you did that.
Oh, thank you.
So I think anybody who has a question can go up to the microphone.
Go ahead.
Now, this may sound crazy because I'm not a writer. I'm more like a mathematician. Now, I look around the room, I see all these, to me, the women in here are very attractive. I don't know about the men, but I want to ask you this, if I may. When you were in Jamaica and now in the United States, do you consider yourself attractive in Jamaica then when you were growing up, in the United States now? Because in the 60s, if you grew up when I grew up, you would have no doubt. Okay.
Wow, good question. Thank you.
That's my husband.
Very good question. Thank you so much for that. So growing up on the island, no, I did not feel attractive at all. And I didn't really feel attractive until I came here to college. I went to Cornell, and at Cornell, I lived in a house of mostly African-American women. It was called Warry House. I'm not sure if anybody here familiar with Cornell in the the little residencies and the houses. Okay, no. So, I lived in Warri House, and Warri House had a lot of African Americans and, women from Africa. They wore great afros, and they had long dreadlocks. And I was coming from the Caribbean. I was coming from Jamaica with my straight hair and, feeling my pressed attire, like feeling, oh, okay, you can only be, because the British system, we were raised to be very proper. We can't be out of place. Everything had to be in place, or hair had to be in place. And so this was the mentality I was coming to Cornell with. So my classmates were all like, who is this? Like, who are you? And so it was actually living with these girls in that house that I started seeing myself as beautiful, as attractive. Like one time, I came back, I had to cut my hair because the perm I had in my hair was actually eating my hair out. And I came back to campus with short hair like Marita's hair. And they're like, oh my God, you're beautiful. And I kept on getting that affirmation. And I was like, oh wow, like this reaction shocked me. And that was actually, and this was my junior year. And that just opened up my eyes. I started being more confident then. I started saying, well, I'm going to walk through this world as a black woman, a dark-skinned black woman holding my head up. And, but it was so sad because I'm from a country where it's 90% black. So the fact that I even felt that way in a country like that, when I came to the United States, racism didn't mean anything to me at the time, because to me it was more hurtful to suffer the intra discrimination I faced in Jamaica as opposed to here, where it's like it's okay, like a white person may look at you and they're like, okay, fine, but it's not as brutal to me as my own black person's looking at me that way. So that was a very interesting time in my life when that turning point happened, and so I grappled with that identity now of being black in America, and also navigating that whole concept of being that dark-skinned Jamaican. But thanks for that.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Tanya. Welcome.
Yes.
So my mom is from Nevis, and everything you talked about British, being everything pressed, everything proper, young ladies shouldn't be too loud. You should
Right.
be seen and not heard.
Yes.
But I think I gained much appreciation from that, and I've always thought that if I wanted to have a family, I would want them to be raised in the Caribbean, because I was raised in St. Thomas. It's U.S. Virgin Islands, U.S. territory, and it's different from Jamaica. But I kind of felt like in the U.S., in St. Thomas, being around so many black people and all my islanders, I felt at home. So my question to you is that if you were to have a family, would you ever at some point want to return to Jamaica?
Wow, you guys are like throwing it. I would love them to, if I have a family, which I know, goodness, I would love to actually, our children, of course, to know where I'm from, right? I would love them to have a full sense of Jamaica, for sure. I'd love them to be raised here, though, but I think, I would love to live that life where I could actually be here part-time and be in Jamaica part-time. I don't know if that ever would happen, but I think, I've fallen in love with America. I feel like, I've spent 17 years in Jamaica, and now I've been living in America for 16 years. So that's, when you look at it, it's going to be half and half at one point. And I think I'm very much at home here, because honestly, when I go back home, I'm still that working class girl. So in my eyes, although now I'm an author, now I go back home and I'm accepted into these random universities, random worlds, like, oh my God, Nicole. But I'm still that 10-year-old working class girl. And if I'm going to be looking at from that lens, like I could be up on the hill sipping wine, but I'm seeing the staff. And I'm remembering my grandmother, I'm seeing my mother, I'm seeing these people, and something would not feel right returning there just to see that happen, where I'm certainly of a certain class, but then, I'm still me, I'm still Nicole. And I don't know if I'm explaining this the right way, but I feel that we're not at that place yet where upward mobility is achievable. You know, here in America, yes, the idea is, yes, I understand that there are disparities here and structural prejudices. I understand that completely, but it's even harder there. You know, there, if you're not born into a certain family, there's nothing you can do. You know, schools are not free there. So I would not want to, I mean, yes, I could return to hopefully change things, but I wouldn't want to revisit that just yet. But I'll definitely write about it. I'm not finished with Jamaica yet, so yeah. But
Well, you know, and you talk about writing about it, and in your essays, you know, because, you know, the power of the pen, you know, you can be a force for social change through your writing. Definitely, yeah.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about the time setting for the book, for the stories. Because when I started reading the book, I didn't really think so much about when it was set until there was a specific reference to the hotel moving to computer record keeping. And it made me think, okay, when exactly is this set? Now, initially I thought like you wanted the stories to have like a timeless quality. Then I noticed two other references to that sort of gave me an idea of when it was set.
Right.
And a very explicit reference towards the end of the novel. I just wanted to know, like, what was the, like, did you want it to have like a timeless, to feel how the story to feel timeless, or did you want it to be set in a very specific time in Jamaica? Does that make sense?
Definitely both, because in the 90s, that was when the tourism boom happened. That was when we were driving around the island. We noticed that the beaches were there were red lines. We couldn't use our own beaches anymore because the hotels were taking over. And, you know, to tell your own countrymen and countrywomen you can't use the beaches because you have to be at a resort or paying money to stay overnight at one of these resorts, you know, that was something that was very upsetting, you know, not only to me, but the older generation of Jamaicans who were so used to using our own beaches. And so the 90s definitely was when I wanted that to take place. But in terms of that timelessness that you mentioned, it's interesting because that never changed. You know, the tourism industry only got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we see the castles got grander. You know, now you drive down the North Coast, Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, and they're huge. And it's not like our visitors are coming and not having a great time. They're having a wonderful time. And I would never discourage anyone not to go and have a wonderful time. But just challenge them saying, why do you have to pay $80 to remind yourself where you are, right? Because remember, you're at the beach, you're in the country, but, you know, most of the times, tourists are not coming into the towns and seeing people. They're told it's dangerous, right? But, you know, having a tour guide, and so it's happening still. It's 2016 and it's still happening. So I'm really glad that, yes, you noticed that it was set in the 90s, but it could be set here right now as well.
Very interesting reading. Who are the people that inspire you, and why do they do it?
Very nice. Thank you. All right. I am inspired a lot by Toni Morrison in terms of writers, right? Toni Morrison, her characters, the complexity, you know, I love complex characters. And that was actually one of the first writers that I've read that touched on that, especially with female characters. And I wanted to really do that with my own work as well. And another person that means a lot to me is Zora Neale Hurston, because she fought for dialect in her work. And for me, dialogue is important. You know, using Jamaican patois in dialogue, that's the people, that's their identity. And it was important for me to keep that. And so when I actually saw that Zora Neale Hurston did it, it actually empowered me to do the same thing in my work as well. So those two women do it for me. And, you know, I don't know if you noticed something, but those two women are also African-American women. I'm Jamaican. And I feel like it's interesting because growing up in Jamaica, we were never exposed to Caribbean writers at all. They were mostly American writers or British writers. So, you know, in terms of our literary tradition, you know, we tend to look outside. And so hopefully in the future, you know, our kids might say, well, you know, we know more Jamaican writers now. But those two women, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, inspired me a lot. Yes. And then, of course, you have here Marita Golden sitting next to me as well. So great inspiration.
Hi, Hi. You mentioned some essays. Are you working on any nonfiction? And of course, I have to ask my favorite, Miss Marita Golden, who I'm a longtime fan. Are you working on anything new? What can we expect? So kind of a dual questions.
Okay. Yes. So I am not working on a book of essays or anything. However, I do have essays being published right now. There's an essay coming out in the New York Times this Sunday, for example, Suspended Play. It talks about the sexualization of our young girls. Because one thing that I touched on in the novel as well was that here Verdine Moore, who is the known lesbian, is tormented, taunted for being gay. But yet still there's Clover, who is the neighborhood handyman, who's also a pedophile, walks around free. And that happens a lot in Jamaica where, these men, they're not brought to justice at all. And these girls, in their school uniforms, they're the ones that these grown men go after, and nothing happens then. So I just wanted to tap into that. So that will be in the Times this Sunday. And in terms of the skin, growing up with Miss Jamaica, that was in Elle magazine. And so most of my essays are getting placed at different places. But in terms of a book of essays, I'm not sure yet. The one I'm working on now is my second novel. So that's in the works. It's set here in New York. It's set in New York City and in Jamaica. So I'm giving readers both worlds in that aspect. But yes, thank you.
Now, where in the Times will it be on Sunday? I mean, which section? The New York Times magazine?
In the op-ed piece.
Oh, the op-ed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Piece.
Okay, the op-ed section. Yeah, I'm working. I have a novel coming out next March, The Wide Circumference of Love, which is the story of a family here in Washington, D.C., a family court judge and her architect husband, and the husband is diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And it's a story of their 35-year marriage, their journey through this, and the changes and transformations.
All right, another question.
You got another question? Go ahead.
Oh, she does.
Or did?
Okay.
I just the point you mentioned about people going to Jamaica and not wanting to see the people, that speaks really loud to me because both of my kids are now in college, and as they were growing up, along with my sister's kids, that was our family trip every year for almost 10 years. We took our kids.
Oh.
I went there on my honeymoon, and after we started having kids, we made it a family trip for the kids, like a back to school. So we went for 10 years straight, and we stayed in Montego Bay.
Right.
And we had the same family at this resort, so they watched my kids grow up. It was the same cook, the same guy that drove us around. So it was good and we intermixed with the people, with the families. We requested them every time we, went back.
Right.
And they treated us like family. And the only thing that my kids were like, okay, we got to change trips, when we ended up with bats in our room. So they were like, okay, we can't go here anymore. But they really enjoyed it, and now they're in their 20s, and they still talk about the experiences that they had there. And I know that when they start, doing traveling on their own, that's some place that they would definitely go back to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh,
So.
thank you for that. Yeah. Wow. And where what resort was this? Oh, Hutton. Okay. Beautiful. Yeah. You had a question, I think. Oh.
Hello, I'm June Costa. I have some comments and then a question. First, when you described what it was like, or in the book, about her bleaching her skin, that was happening, as I guess in America as well. I have some relatives who did that, and one of them, when her mother passed away and her mother was dark complexion, she didn't even go to her mother's funeral because she didn't want her husband, who was white, to know that she was really black. So it's a painful thing that goes through families in America as well. Right. But I want to compliment you on expressing it so articulately. And I'm wondering if you know of the organization called Black Girls Rock.
I do. I
Yeah.
love them.
And I hope that you will do some essays, because there still are African American girls in this country that don't have the self-worth or self-esteem if they're not tall, light complexion,
Right.
and have as what they call good hair.
Yes.
That still exists. So my question is, do you see politically a change happening in Jamaica that eventually will change that stigma?
Ooh, nice. I love that. First of all, I want to commend you for that too, because my wife is African American, and we talk about this all the time. And yes, it happens here in America as well. The thing with Jamaica, it's complicated, because I think most of us as Jamaicans, we look at African Americans as revolutionaries in terms of like what they do to achieve equality, right? But I feel like there was a complacency there on the island, and most of our beauty queens, for example, Miss Jamaica Universe, Miss Jamaica World, they're lighter hue with that quote unquote good hair, and so a lot of working class black girls are looking at that saying that's the beauty, that's what we need to be to achieve that. So Tandy, my character, looks at that, she bleaches her skin. She already has that quote unquote coolie hair, as Miss Ruby said, right? But she has internalized so much things, and she, like many of those girls growing up in Jamaica, myself included, had internalized that. Is it gonna change? I'm not sure, because still we're in 2016 and it's the same thing. You do see our Miss Jamaica Universe and Miss Jamaica World on the calendars, and that's who everybody points to as pretty. And so when a little 4-year-old girl is seeing even her grown mother saying that's a pretty woman, she's looking in the mirror saying, oh, so what am I then? So a lot of that question happens still to this day, and a lot of and unfortunately, again, back to the class thing, a lot of the working class impoverished Jamaicans are bleaching their skin because it's access. It's looked at as access. That's how you can actually get up in life. And the country itself, the government is looking at it as, oh gosh, these people are disgusting. Like, how could they be doing this? Like, and the critique is not in depth enough, because they're not seeing that it's a reflection of society. These kids are not sociologists, but they're wearing our pain on their skin, and it's still happening to this day.
Well, you showed us a video once.
Yes, I did.
About the bleaching.
Right.
Where you actually visually saw what she described in the book. And there was a scene where one of the women said that now that she had bleached her skin, she had more customers in the market.
Right. So something as simple as that.
So something as simple as that.
It could be like right now the manager of politics and Prose say, because I bleach my skin, more people are coming through the door to buy books. It doesn't make any sense, but in their eyes, it opens doors.
In everybody's eyes, because more customers are coming to her.
Right.
So it's a circular truth.
Yeah.
Nicole, excuse me, everybody, but some of it has already changed, especially in the Western world. You see the camera there? That's a high definition camera. The old cameras, like if you were under camera in the old days, your skin could not be seen. But now, because of all the different tones and even another type of camera, beauty or skin tones and all that solves some of the problems right there. I wouldn't be able to see you on the old cameras. So half of that is taken care of.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Hi.
I actually have a follow-up about the bleaching question. I know that also it's not just an issue with young girls. There's also an issue with young men.
Yes.
And the men, like you mentioned, Charles, earlier, the men in this book were also like deep characters. And so looking at like moving forward, do you anticipate exploring like male characters and like what men and especially young men and like out of school youth in Jamaica are going through and why they're bleaching when Cartel says you need skin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you know about Cartel too?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Jamaica for about 3.5 years. So I loved this book and thought that it just
beautiful
summed it all up. But I think that what I saw was women coming to in rural Jamaica, women being like, you know, these boys look silly. Like, I don't want to be with a boy who looks like this. So just exploring young men in Jamaica, and if you could foresee any kind of characters that would go in depth in that.
Definitely. And, you know, well, Vybz Kartel is a famous dancehall artist, and Vybz Kartel bleaches his skin. He says he bleaches it for style, but really he bleaches his skin because he wants to appear lighter skin, more attractive. He has all these tattoos, and he said, well, the tattoos are going to show better when my skin is lighter. And, you know, so in Vybz Kartel bleaching his skin, he makes it. He also makes products, bleaching products, cake soap, for these kids to buy the cake soap to bleach their skin as well. And it's like Piper like leading the kids, you know. So that's what Vybz Kartel does. And I'm glad that you mentioned Vybz Kartel, because these young boys are seeing Vybz Kartel as this idol, right? The girls are going to look at them now because they have lighter skin. So what these boys are also doing, they're dyeing their hair jet black with jet black sideburns so that they appear lighter skin, so the girls will be attracted to them. And again, it's society. They're wearing our scars. They're saying the girls are not going to like them if they're not light skinned and they don't have that hair, that wavy, whatever cap, skull cap wave hair, you know. So they're like, the girls are also traumatized. They've internalized so much, and we typically ignore the boys. Even here, you know, we talk about a lot of things. We ignore boys, but yes, they're also vulnerable, and I'd love to explore. In fact, what I'm working on now, there are little elements of that, and so, yeah, thank you for asking that. And it really, it's sad, but you also expressed to me too what the women are saying. Well, who would want those guys? But in their eyes, they see themselves as more attractive looking this way. And right, exactly, more money too. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, is that the last?
You go ahead.
I just wanted to comment though. Question comment though, in that when the last person was asking about Vybz Kartel and this concept of why is the thought that Vybz Kartel was leading the people initially to bleach, and how everyone put it on Vybz Kartel when Vybz Kartel was really reflecting the masses. And it's interesting because it's kind of like, if they weren't going to buy cake soap from Vybz Kartel, they were going to buy it from somebody else. And
Exactly.
so it's almost interesting in terms of the cyclical stuff that's going on. So you're right, though, the scars being worn, him being a reflection of the masses, but then also capitalizing off of the masses at the same time just makes it more complex.
Thank you for that.
Well, I've been given the signal that it's time to sell and sign some books.
Yeah, thank you.